The January 8th, 2015 meeting of the D.C. Board of Ethics and Government Accountability is now in session. It is 1:15 p.m. There is a quorum present consisting of Board Member Deborah Lathan and Board Member Laura Richards. We will proceed with a report of the Office of Open Government. We will then close the meeting and go into executive session. And then we will reopen the executive session and conclude the public meeting. I realize this is a departure from our agenda. Thank you. Will you proceed?
Sure. I'm pleased to announce that the IT specialist position has been filled. Latora Whitaker joined the Office of Open Government on December 15th. The Best Practices Report and the Urban Institute Report. The Office of Open Government submitted its recommendations on best practices as part of the BEGA 2014 Best Practices Report. I've shared the report with the then Mayor-elect's transition team, her current general counsel, and the director of what is now referred to as the Mayor's Office of Talent and Appointments. That is a change in name from the Office of Boards and Commissions. It's now called the Mayor's Office of Talent and Appointments. It is my hope that the recommendations will help to guide the new administration's efforts toward a more open and transparent government. In my meeting yesterday with the director of MOTA, he was very receptive to the idea of maintaining the central calendar, boards and commissions on the Office of Open Government and/or BEGA site. But I'm sure we'll be discussing it more in the coming weeks. I was also pleased to see that the Urban Institute in its recommendations for the new Bowser administration, including leveraging the power of open data to improve city services, advocates strongly on behalf of Mayor Bowser to continue the momentum of last year by solidifying a culture in district government that values open data. The Urban Institute recommends that the Office of Open Government be more involved in transparency, FOIA, and open government policies established by the new mayor. The rulemaking, as discussed in our last meeting, establishing procedures for enforcing the Open Meetings Act, was published in the D.C. Register on December 26th. That's the final rulemaking, and it will become effective on January 26th. The new Office of Open Government website will launch on January 14th. The complaint procedures set out in the rulemaking will also be ready and up on the site, including a online form as discussed. And we're also going to unveil a new Office of Open Government logo, just to kind of set the office apart and establish it as it should be, as it is, an independent office. Finally, and last but not least, I'm pleased to have Tim Abdullah with me today. Tim and his team are responsible for creating Open Data DC. It's the new repository for DC data, and that's a very general term, but he's going to explain much more in a presentation today. Tim and I have been meeting on a regular basis and have committed to continue collaboration, and I'll leave it to him to introduce himself and explain his efforts at Octo.
Excellent. Do you want to switch the...
Yeah, I'll switch it over.
Thank you, Tracy. My name is Tim Abdullah. I'm with Octo, the Office of the Chief Technology Officer, and my group oversees, traditionally was the GIS program, the citywide data warehouse program, and what will become the open data program. So at the end of the last administration, we started highlighting all of the successes that have been brought forth as part of the open government program. So I thought I'd do a quick highlight of those and dive just a few seconds into each of the sites so that you can see them and have a better sense of what the tools that actually exist for making our government more open to the citizenry in the District of Columbia. So with that, I'm going to start, and I'm going to go through these very quick, and then they can be made available as part of the record, I suppose. So the Open Government Initiative launched as part of the Open Government Mayoral's Order from July 2014. You guys are well aware of that. And we really look at it as components of several different things, and there are 6 components here. The one thing I want you to remember from here, if you remember anything, is that top one, open.dc.gov. Will get you to everything else. So that's the one site, open.dc.gov. So open.dc.gov looks like this. Obviously been reskinned with the new mayor. It allows you to get access to all the open government information that we are tracking and links to all this stuff that I'm going to cover today. Everything from Track DC to Grade DC to the Open Data Catalog to the actual directive to other open information like the public employee salary information and budgetary information, etc. So that's just a great single site location to gain access to all that. Secondarily is we launched FOIA Express. FOIA Express went live in July 2014. FOIA Express allows a single location for FOIA across the district, foia.dc.gov. This is its new look with the administration change, and it basically allows for a reading room of anyone who has asked for FOIA information. Anyone can find what other people have asked for here in the FOIA reading room. So it's a single source location to find all FOIA data in the district and be able to track where FOIAs are coming through from every agency. We also had grade.dc.gov. Now, this was an earlier initiative done in 2012, but has run through and it now provides metrics on the performance of how well agencies are doing, similar to like a Yelp, where citizenry can grade each agency on the work that that agency is doing for them. The agency is then given a grade, just like in school, F failing all the way up to an A+ for exemplary work. I just took this screen capture as of December 2014. The District of Columbia overall has got a grade of A-. This is a very good way of exposing how well the district's doing in meeting citizenry needs as part of being open. Data.dc.gov is one of my babies, and we launched it anew in this year. There was always the data catalog in the District of Columbia since 2006. This is a relaunch, a fresh new start. There were many stale data sets on that older data catalog. This new data catalog does away with the stale, brings in many new. When we originally launched it, 235 new on top of 200 existing, and now we're at 600 plus. So if you go to data.dc.gov, you'll be presented with a search, discovery, and use platform that allows people to look at data, use data, explore data, and download it how they want to. I normally provide a quick demonstration of what this looks like. If you're interested in seeing. Let me zoom it's a little bigger so that people can actually see what we're looking at here. Basically, you have a search window like you would for anything else, and I can search for something like public schools. So if I want to find out public school data, I would do a search. I can see there's 125 results for public school data. I can read about this data. I can actually go right here and download the data as a shapefile, as KMLs, or as an API. That API allows programmers to develop against this data and build apps. This is the development community. If this is a data set I'm interested in, I can drill down into it. It's going to put it on a map for me. It is going to give me all the data set attributes that are here. I can read about metadata. I can go into the licensing. This is actually huge.
Can you search test scores for public schools?
Test scores for public schools, I can. I will tell you the results aren't going to come up. There's several data sets that exist on our data catalog, an internal data catalog, where we're tracking and triaging all the desired data sets to get out there. Those are definitely some of those data sets that we want to get out there that are not yet through the system. So we have an entire process for connecting and collaborating with agencies, making sure we maintain a persistent, consistent connection with that data, curating it properly and creating the right metadata around it, and making sure that we can have a way of hosting the data and housing the data for historical archiving, and then publishing it out to the public domain in the best way possible. That's a process.
So everything that goes up here will be in an open data format capable of manipulation. No PDFs allowed?
Period. Yes.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Absolutely. And so that's part of that process, is going through that. We did launch this as Creative Commons public domain designation level 0, which means public domain. We're the first city in the country to do that, period, which is impressive within itself. So if we go back to the open data, so if we looked at this public school data, I can have access to the actual tables. So this is the actual table chart of school data. And I can actually play with this data, like if I wanted to look at the total students and I wanted to filter the data by total number of students within the school system, I can do that. And if I wanted to do charts and graphs off this data, I can do that as well. But I can download it and work with it in any one of my systems that I would like to do. So we have the ability to do all kinds of things. For example, I could say, I want to look at capacity of the school system. And maybe this bar chart's not the best way to do that, so let's look at a donut chart. And donut chart doesn't, oops, that's the name of schools. Sorry, let me change that. So let's look at capacity. Let's just do facility use. That one's there. So this shows me it's facility use, elementary, campus, whatever, different types of schools. Then I can even summarize that by something like capacity. Sorry, I had that out of order. Learn how to play with your data. And now I have all this access to this great data, and I can share it and embed it. So this is some of the things you can do with the new data catalog, which is pretty phenomenal compared to where we were at. Track.dc.gov is an implementation of the data coming from data.dc.gov. So one of our own challenges is something called dog fooding in the industry, eat what you serve. So we used our data to build track.dc.gov, which is has been there, but we reinvigorated it, created a new site, and that can be had at track.dc.gov. And from there, you can look at each individual agency independently. I believe BEGA is under the government and direction and support. These organizational structures based on budget organizational structure, not by administrations because they change too much. But this is the track.dc.gov page for BEGA. It shows your performance metrics, your KPIs, shows your budget, your full-time employee counts, the number of vacancies you have available, the spending, your spending to date, historical spending, all this stuff is interactive. You can click on and integrate and interact with all these, and then your purchase card spending. All this data is not only interactable, but you can download any of it here as an Excel spreadsheet. And as I said, this is all content coming from that same data.dc.gov site, just with a whole wrapper put around it to make it look.
Can we populate it on our own site as with an embed code, or do we have to link directly to it?
Like you want that embedded in your website?
Yeah. It's our.
It's just a separate URL, so there's no reason why you couldn't do it, and we're just embedding it. So yes.
Could you blow up our screen again?
Sure.
Our bar chart there.
Here, let me make this a little bigger. It's hard to see. I'm sorry. That makes it a little easier. So the first thing that we pull from is we have a database of logos. We should probably get a new logo for y'all since it looks like yours is a little fuzzy. And then a statement that comes from the mission statement from the budget, and that can be altered. And then performance measures. These are your actual KPI performance measures. And it shows you which ones are fully achieved and not fully achieved. There is what looks to be redundancy here with stuff written out several times. That's to be 501 compliant for visually impaired citizens. So this is actually a fully machine-readable solution, which is unique. If I wanted to just look at what's not being achieved, I can click on that, and it's interactive. Right? I can clear all my selections. I can download or print this from anywhere within the page. If I go to the budget approval, for example, I can see what the budget details are. I can see how much was there, Office of Open Government, how much is there, and then how much has already been spent. And I can compare it to other departments or agencies if I wanted to, within or outside the cluster, for example. I can look at the number of full-time employees within the agency. There are 2 in the Office of Open Government, 9 within the Board of Ethics. Other agencies are not more exciting, but have larger numbers, like FEMS or something is really interesting because they'll always have 200 plus open vacancies for fire personnel. And then working with Director Stokes, we identified a metric that 15% vacancy is healthy. So if you're less than 15% vacant, then you're doing okay. In this case, there's 1 vacancy rate here, which is probably filled. So this data is as of January 7th, 2015, which is yesterday. The position you announced, was that?
No. The position is not filled yet.
Oh, there's yet another position, so this is accurate. And this data here is accurate as of January 6th, 2015. So each section has its own accuracy of when the data is. So there's your total budget. See how much has been spent versus what you had, the number of pay periods, the salaries, the overtime, other types of stuff. And you can drill into any of this by clicking on stuff and find out more information.
And this is live. I can go home and do this on my home computer. Okay.
It's available to everybody in the world. We had 1 million unique hits every month that was up. It's not unique page views. That's not human beings going to it. That's Google crawling the site because the data is always changing. But it's a good number anyways. Yeah. How to lie with numbers, right? That's what my team's good at. Not good at, but. So that's track.dc.gov, and that is up and available for everybody and being maintained. The last piece of the whole puzzle of open governments is the Open Advisory Group, which brings me back to Traci. So that's how we feed into one another.
So unfortunately, I don't have anything new to report to the board today concerning the Mayor's Open Government Advisory Group. I have a tentative meeting scheduled with the Mayor's General Counsel next Monday to discuss the Open Government Advisory Group and FOIA and other items. And I'm hoping that by next week, I will have some direction on what Mayor Bowser intends to do concerning the group itself.
How do you keep all that data current that you just showed us?
Yeah, very good question. So the Open Data Initiative is relatively new in the District of Columbia, but the concept and the philosophy and the process has a long legacy. In 2001, Octa was formed, and the first group inside of Octa was the GIS group. And the GIS group, under a mayoral order in 2002, created the DCGIS Steering Committee. The Steering Committee is a committee that works with every agency in the District of Columbia to connect to their data, curate it, and disseminate it, and that's at the geospatial level. Now, GIS data is just data with a spatial column. There's nothing special about GIS data. So we've been doing this for almost 15 years. And through there, we have processes in place. Some of those are very mechanical processes where we have computers talking to computers that are just automated, persistent stream of data, and those are the best. There are many systems throughout the District of Columbia government that are not that automated. So we rely on interpersonal relationships to maintain access to data that may exist in Excel spreadsheets or PDF documents, wherever it may be. And then on a periodical basis with that agency, we get updates and we publish it that way. I have a team of about 40 staff members. It's not that big yet. It's 27 today with 13 positions to be slotted over the next 2 to 3 months to fill out a team of 40, which would comprise data coordinators that do communication with the agencies, data technicians, data analysts, DBAs, ETL experts, basically the technical folks that make sure it all happens. So we have a staff in place that's been doing that for a long time. We're going to augment that staff with some more people and be able to do this district-wide. My KPI goals are to add 100 new data sets this year. We're well on the way to do that. And then 250 next year in FY16, which would be a huge goal. A lot of those data sets are not going to be that difficult because, as you've recognized, I'm sure, the district shares a lot of data, but as like PDF documents. So by us figuring out what fed that PDF document and getting to the root of the data and resharing it as machine readable, useful information, we'll actually hit our numbers a little more easier. So those are some of my KPI goals. And then in 17, if this all works, the new administration wants it to continue, we're looking at 400 new data sets in 17, taking the total number to just over 1,000.
One last question. Now, is there any way that the general population knows about all this? I mean, other than having to go on the website, is there any sort of campaign to let citizens know that this kind of information is available?
Many citizens use our data, and public, private corporations use our data as well. So there is awareness that the data exists. We have we track our daily downloads of data, have been for years. It's another one of our KPIs. We average about 50,000 unique downloads of data a month. So we know there's at least that many downloads. We can do better. We have engaged a new communications officer within Octo, Michael Rupert, and I have hired a new open data liaison, Jill Melnicki. And between Jill and Michael, we are working on doing better citizen engagement and making them more inclusive arrangement so that people are aware of what we do and that what we're doing actually meet their needs. We have some things coming up that I don't want to announce publicly here that will be pretty shocking, amazing, and people will know. So yes.
So, and then also too, Tim and I have discussed ways that the Open Government Office can help support them in their outreach efforts. So I'm sure when he's ready, we'll discuss the particulars, and then we'll come up with a way to work together to make sure that we're reaching as many people as possible.
Thank you.
And that concludes the Office of Open Government update.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Most illuminating.
Let me ask something. There were going to be two components to the closed portion of the session today. One was going to be our regular confidential update on investigations and things like that, and the other was going to be personnel related.
We're going to do both. We'll do the investigations first.
I do.
Then we'll just do the regular closed session on investigation.
Okay.
Do you agree, Laura?
I think it might be useful just to kind of lay some of the issues on the table and see where we go from here. We'll do a short personnel thing because I think there are a couple of matters that are just need to be articulated even if not decided. Okay.
And so you want to do that second?
Second.
Okay.
Okay.
And so we don't want to do the public portion of my presentation yet.
So let's do the whole public meeting together. Okay.
Okay, so we'll go through the public portion of the meeting first, right?
No, we're going to do the closed session first and then come back to the public session.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That's fine.
So, pursuant to, if I could get a motion for the board to go into executive session to discuss ongoing confidential investigations pursuant to DC Official Code. Come again? Okay, so pursuant to what's the language in the agenda. Okay. So we will. So I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Good. All right. So.
Is the camera off and being restarted?
Oh, and the time is now 1:37.
I'll just go through the list, and
Do you want to
we should probably put.
It's recording.
No. Okay.
At 2:31, the board's open session resumed, it having concluded its executive session in which it discussed matters pursuant to DC Code 2-575B regarding investigations and quasi-judicial functions, and also the board discussed personnel matters pursuant to DC Code 2-575B10. Thank you.
Okay. I know we're in a bit of a time crunch, so I'll move forward. The time that we are resuming is 2:31, it looks like, from where I'm sitting. All right. First, as an initial matter, and maybe I should have done this at the earlier part when we were in public session, I would like to introduce BEGA's newest employee, Mr. Andrew Jackson. Mr. Jackson comes to us with 27 years government experience, having started out at the auditor's office, moving to the Office of Budget and Planning, then to the Child and Family Services Agency, and most recently at the Department of Corrections. In all of those capacities, he worked in finance and has a great knowledge not of finance but of the district government. And so we are very fortunate to be able to hire him, and so I want to welcome him. And he's going to be working on the financial disclosure filings and the lobbyist registration and activity reporting, and I think his experience will really bring to bear the types of auditing and investigatory tools we need, not just to have compliance, but to look for discrepancies in the filings, the activity reporting, and the financial disclosures. And so, Mr. Jackson, welcome.
Welcome, Mr. Andrew Jackson, or perhaps we should say welcome, Mr. President. Your resume is indeed impressive. You are a great addition to BEGA.
Okay, so despite a holiday-filled month, we did make some good progress. We opened 3 investigations, but we were able to close 7, which brings our running total down to 11 open investigations. We are in compliance with our publication and reporting obligations, including the quarterly complaint report, which was recently posted on the website. We've already gotten inquiries from the press about some of the matters reported on there that we're going to be responding to. As far as our trainings attended by the staff, Mr. Burns was fortunate enough to attend the Kogel Conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Kogel stands for the Council on Government Ethics and Laws, and it is our industry. It's our industry sort of entity that all different states belong to. In fact, the Office of Campaign Finance and the Board of Elections send a contingent there every year. Federal OGE has people there. And so Mr. Burns was our representative this year. He came back with lots of valuable information for us. And we're thinking next year, if budget funds will permit, that we will send more than one individual to this, because most agencies had more than one person there. It's a several-day event filled with workshops, getting on consistent sort of interpretations of similar laws in different jurisdictions, and it even has open government components. So I'm hoping open government will be there as well. All right, we conducted a total of 7 trainings. We did a full ethics training for the Attorney General's Office prosecutors. We did one for the DC public schools. We did our regular monthly ethics training in our boardroom. And then we did a monthly post-employment training. We did 2 new employee orientations. And we also did a one-on-one post-employment training with an outgoing public official, high level. Item D, advisory opinions. There were no formal advisory opinions requests since the last meeting. We're still working on 2, one based on a request and the other based on a sua sponte opinion concerning a local Hatch Act. We provided 68 bits of informal advice that we tracked, including a number, as you can imagine, of post-employment issues with the transition going on. We also received 2 questions on dual pay issues, holding the 2 district jobs or holding a district and a federal job. The rules prohibit holding 2 such jobs for a total of more than 40 hours a week. We received a number of questions, as you might imagine, on holiday gifts and gift giving. Those are permitted, although we tried to stress best practices where there were holiday gifts involved. Coercion, of course, is prohibited. It's also permissible, you may or may not know, to collect money for gifts such as a holiday gift, but the donations towards such collections have to be nominal, $10 or less. All this was laid out in our holiday memo that we issued, I think it was back in early December. Our best practices report was issued. I think Ms. Hughes already mentioned it, and we delivered it all around the Wilson building personally. So folks got to see our faces. I hope it serves as the basis for some ethics legislation in the near future, maybe as part of our CCC, our Comprehensive Code of Conduct. We get to item F, but do you guys want to do F first or go right to lobbyist and financial disclosure matters? Because we have a couple of outstanding things on lobbyist and financial disclosure that I need the board's action on.
Okay. Okay, let's do the action items and then come back to F. Okay.
Okay. So we have received 2 appeals to the Ethics Board regarding the imposition of fines. One, 1267-001, is an ANC member named Phil Grenier.
Mr. Sobin, hold. I think we can speed this along. We've read them.
So
we're prepared
as to 1267 ANC Phil Griner, does the board, the BEGA has filed an opposition motion. How does the board stand on his waiver?
I'm persuaded by the arguments in the board's opposition, and I would be happy to deny the waiver.
Thank you. And as to ANC Zara Jelani, case number 1270-001, where BEGA also filed an opposition motion. How does the board want to decide?
Deny. Okay.
Do you have orders, Christine, or should we get them to Bob tomorrow?
No, we can get them tomorrow. Yeah,
And
those
Bob
we
will
do have.
sign those? Okay. Let's do this with a vote. Is there a motion to deny both of the appeals of the fines, penalties imposed for tardy filing? I second. Moved and seconded.
Sorry, it would be denying the waivers of the penalties. Yes. That's
Right.
the waiver. Yes.
All right, you've got a 2-0 vote. And I was struck by the fact that they seem to have missed all of the notices that went back last spring, the 5 notices. The dog ate my homework. Okay, so.
Okay, now we can either go, there were 2 other things I was just going to mention about lobbyists and financial disclosure, but in the interest of time, if you want to either skip right to item F, the Comprehensive Code of Conduct, I don't really have anything to discuss on the non-confidential investigations today.
Okay, let's go to the Code of Conduct.
Okay. All right, so after nearly 6 months of work, I'm pleased to present for discussion today the draft Comprehensive Code of Conduct. As you know, we started this project after the Council passed legislation directing BEGA to submit a comprehensive code of conduct for legislative approval. The code is intended to combine all ethics standards into one body of law and bring consistency to the current varying standards. In drafting the CCC, as we're calling it, I personally met with every council member over the summer to elicit their ideas and concerns. Drafts of the CCC were circulated to the legal staff of both the executive and the council, and comments were received, some of which you have before you today. The draft you have before you was circulated 2 months ago. I realized that it would be impractical to go over each provision in the time we have here today, so Mr. Grimaldi, we have selected certain portions of the CCC that raise issues the board may wish to consider and discuss. Depending upon the progress we make, it is my intention to submit the CC to the council within the next 8 weeks. Mr. Grimaldi, would you like to start us off?
Just a reminder, we need to go back to my point.
Okay, if there's time.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Okay.
Make sure you do that. Okay, what I did was distribute a very selective list of 5 issues that the board needs to either note or resolve. And again, given the constraints of time, we won't do it today. But I do want to recognize some continuing interest in the Comprehensive Code of Conduct. You'll note Mike Beckham is back. And he has expressed to the extent that there's time in a new position. Did that happen yet?
I'm coming up at the end of my second rotation.
Okay. To lend whatever helping hand he can. So I want the board to recognize that continuing interest and willingness to help out.
Thank you. This is really wonderful, and you did play such a key role in getting it this far. That's real public service. Okay.
Okay, so the first one on the list is the old question of lobbyists on boards and commissions. As noted in the best practices report, however, since your last substantive discussion about the issue, the District of Columbia Court of Appeals weighed in. So we're going to need to factor that into your thinking, as well as, I think, the council's very clear indication of where it's coming from in the committee report, accompanying some of its latest BEGA-related legislation. So again, this is issue identification.
So are you saying essentially that the tide is sort of is leaning in the directions of allowing lobbyists?
Yes.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yes. And I think the question is to what extent the board's willing to go to allow that.
I thought that I saw language, and I believe it was in the BPR, that said there were public members who were on those boards and commissions in that required council confirmation, I believe, could not be lobbyists. There's a designated group.
That I think very much a part of the conversation you're going to have.
Well, where did I see that language? Was that in the BPR? Okay, I know that we had identified a group that we
Yes,
thought
you
ought
did.
not to be.
It was that group in the Confirmation Act.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we can go forward with saying that if you're in the Confirmation Act, you can't be a lobbyist, and then see what happens. I mean, that's where I'd go. Is that where you want to go? Right. Okay.
Okay, well, that's a fair indication of where the board wants to go with it. Okay. The second one, again, it's been reflected in both BPRs, adding into the conflicts of interest provisions the concept of a personal interest, which is non-financial. We'd use the example, I think, at least second time out, about the ANC, who is a member of a community organization, and then also, on the ANC, and takes off one hat and puts on the other, and kind of, make his own case to his own. So that's the concept. There is a draft definition of personal interest. I certainly invite your attention to it. It's not set in stone. It's based on what I can identify certainly as several sources from other jurisdictions that have attempted to define this concept. So again, in terms of issue identification, that's something the board's going to have to think about. As reflected in Thorne Posen's comments, you'll see this 1-year cooling off period is a hot, and indeed has been a hot issue as far as we're concerned. A couple of policy issues, even though it's reflected in the existing PPM. Does the board want to just wholesale incorporate it into the CCC? Or
Well, I have a question about that, and that is, why wouldn't we more closely mirror some of the federal rules on post-employment cooling off periods? For example, I recall from my FCC days, the restriction was that you were always restricted from anything that you personally worked on that did not apply to the entire industry. But if you worked on something that was an industry-wide kind of thing, you were not restricted from that. And so I guess I'm saying maybe we should, because this can be a real hardship on people, coming out of government employment.
Indeed.
And so I'm thinking if we could make it more, if you worked on a matter that was specific to a specific client, a specific contract, I certainly see that limitation. But if you worked on something that was, say, a general rule that applied to everybody in the industry, then I don't, and I'm just using this as an example. Then no, you shouldn't. That shouldn't be. That shouldn't be applicable. That shouldn't be part of the cooling off period.
We already follow that. That's the it falls outside of the definition of a particular matter.
Right.
So,
but this doesn't. This seems to be broader. What I've just read here.
well, the difference, though, the real difference is that when they changed the DPM back in April, they included in it a 1-year cooling off period where you could not go back before your agency for 1 year.
For anything.
And in the federal government, it applies to very high-level senior employees.
Exactly.
And for 2 years.
No, it's only 1 year in the feds.
If you're in the yeah, that's
Well, no, I mean, I was a senior. I was SES, and I mean, at least the way the rule was that some things you were barred from life on, like if you had done something specific. But other things, after a year, you could still go. You could not go back to the agency. You could work with a company that went to the agency giving advice, but you could make a personal appearance on behalf of that.
Right, you could do the behind-the-scenes stuff.
Right.
And we could debate someday on whether, that's outside the spirit, but it's legal. But my feeling on this one is the city, when it changed the DPM a year or so ago, was aware of where the feds were.
That's
And
true.
elected to be more
More
rigorous.
stringent.
So we've had this debate. the city had the debate, those
fair
DPM
enough.
things, rules went around, everybody weighed in. So I'm not sure why we would want to have the debate again.
No, okay, fair enough. I mean, fair enough. I get your point there, that debate, and that's clearly the most obvious reference would have been to the federal government.
Okay.
I just recall the young lady that was here in tears about her position when she left, if you recall.
Right.
Well, okay, we don't have to decide it today, but I still think it's a little overly broad.
Next one up is a possible waiver for UDC law professors who are involved in clinical programs. I forget, how did that issue hit our radars?
I can,
Nancy?
yeah, I can speak to this. It came in as an informal advice request from a student. UDC Law for the last 2 years has had a night program. So prior to 2 years ago, this wouldn't have been an issue that would have come up. It would have come up for professors, but it hadn't come up in this respect. But it was a gentleman who worked for DCRA during the day, is taking the UDC Law night program at night, and wanted to know if he could take part in a clinic that would come before the district government, or would even perhaps have the district government as an adversary, if they were in a criminal clinic or something like that, a juvenile criminal clinic. And the question was, could he do both? And we came down on the side of no, of course, because of the representation part of the DPM that says you can't represent before the District of Columbia. And so it brought us to the question of, well, these law students aren't the ones who are actually the representative, because they sign their law students in court number, but it's their professor who puts their bar number on documents. So they're the ones who are really coming before the District of Columbia. So that's how the question came up, is how do we deal with these folks who are public employees, but who part of their job is representing before the District of Columbia? So.
Oh, well, yeah, I thought that was kind of a no-brainer. Of course, we have to formalize the relief.
Yep.
Okay.
And then, again, as reflected in both, now all three BPRs, the ANCs and their status. Now, the council took a big step in adding new section 201A to the Ethics Act, the clarification piece to make clear that the Code of Conduct implies district-wide, including the ANCs. However, there are a few loopholes that can, as we've suggested in the BPRs, be closed to make rock solid sure that the ANCs are subject to the board's jurisdiction, not only through the Ethics Act itself, but through the comprehensive code of conduct. So again, by way of illustration, those are some of the issues that the board's going to need to resolve. I think perhaps a good way to start thinking about those issues is to go through my to-do list. And I could note that, as you probably did yourself, the to-do list doesn't even reach all of the articles in the draft. Articles 2, 5, 10, 12, 16, 17, and 19 are not reflected in the to-do list. Basically, every time I pick up the draft, and this is in no way, shape, or form a reflection on Mike's long and great work, something occurs to me that something has to be done. So I suggest that you look at it in that light. I am going to throw out there right now what will be the need, I'm sure, to have special meetings of the board if we're going to be, on an 8-week schedule to get through some of these issues and put a legislative package together within that time.
Okay.
So please start reading. Questions, certainly comments, fire them away. But I think today is just the very, very start of what will have to be a continuing discussion.
One thing I thought that was needed is some kind of a preamble. Now, maybe you were going to do that at the end. Code of conduct.
Okay.
Just to say, hey, here's the code of conduct. Here's where it comes from, you know.
I think a related concept, and it's noted up there right in the general considerations, what's the package going to look like? Okay. There's at least one model out there. It's the WMATA Compact. And if you go through it, it looks like a compact. It doesn't read like a statute. Okay. So when you would think of this concept, the Comprehensive Code of Conduct, do you want it to look and read like, say, the Ethics Act itself, with all of these subsections? You want it to look like something else? So these are considerations. The legislation itself could be quite simple. Simply 2-3 sections that incorporate an attachment, otherwise known as the Comprehensive Code of Conduct, and the council would adopt it. And then there'd be a fiscal impact statement, and that would be the end of it. So a preamble certainly, I think, is sort of in that ballpark, and I think that's a good idea.
Well, one thing I'm sorry, Traci. One thing, though, I think you guys should think about, I don't know where exactly to come down on this, is whether this will replace the current DPM completely, or if it will be yet another set of standards. So in other words, the DPM would then become personnel action that the agencies could take, disciplinary action against their employees for, and then the code of conduct, which we would enforce. As you recall, one of the reasons that they wanted this is so that there was one body of law that would apply to the employees. And the sanctions could be different. We can impose sanctions. They can impose discipline, but the standards should be the same.
Right.
So,
and one way to accomplish that is that in the legislation, which can be short and sweet, could have a section on so-called conforming amendments.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those amendments can be to repeal, as Darrin's suggesting, Chapter 18 of the DPM.
yep.
Well, I would be in favor of that, but however it's resolved, yes, because there has to be just one set of rules, because when I've spent some time trying in my mind to figure out how these two things work together. So there really should be one, and that seems a simple way to do it. And also, you might try moving the definitions, because I sat down to read this and I was encountered with 18 pages of definitions before I got to the meat, and that's just daunting for someone trying to figure out what to do. You could put the definitions in the back.
Yeah, and that's the way rulemaking is generally done.
Mm-hmm.
Section 999 is there in the end. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good suggestion.
Okay, because really when you get to Article 2, that gives you some of your basic preamble type material.
I have an efficiency question. So we've been talking for just about the past year and a half of the need for there to be amendments to the Open Meetings Act and to FOIA.
Mm-hmm.
So for the sake of efficiency, is it going to be more productive for BEGA and for the Council, for the Office of Open Government, to also submit at the same time this body of amendments and legislation to the Council? Because if so, then I'll have to get hustling right away, and I don't have a problem with doing that. But my question is it efficient for the board? And Jack, I suppose the question to you, would that be efficient for the council, do you think?
I'm not sure about efficient in terms of getting stuff through. Sometimes codes of conduct get sort of controversial, and open government tends to be kind of a feel-good thing most of the time. And you might find it easier to get your amendments through as a standalone.
I agree with Laura, having a lot of experience in this area. You don't want to be saddled with what we got going, because this could be a year of debate in the council or more.
Yeah.
All right, that's fair. I just thought that I'd pose the
No, it's
question.
great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good question. Deborah, you got to run.
Yeah. Is there anything else we have to vote on before I?
Unless you need something from them, let's just table it for now.
Let me just tell you, Michael Brown.
Yes.
Okay. Stacy, as reported to me as late as today, has yet to hear back from his counsel. So we can't say one way or another with any certainty whether negotiations are on, off, or somewhere in between. One suggestion is Stacy, tomorrow. Stacy comes back tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
She can reach out to counsel to see where things are at, or I can, and basically say, well, because you haven't gotten back to Stacy, I'm assuming that the negotiations are over. The board wants you to file your opposition to the OGE's motion till late file. So does the board have a preference? You want me to reach out to her? Want Stacy to
Well,
read
you said
it?
Stacy's back tomorrow, right?
Tomorrow.
Just have Stacy do it tomorrow.
Okay. All right, and then I'll update you
Yeah.
from there. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So, no, normally at this point, we open up the meeting to any members of the public who wish to speak. I see no members of the public present. I don't count you as a member of the public, Mike. So therefore, the meeting is adjourned at 2:58 p.m. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. See you next month.
Okay.
Yes. Once every month.